The purpose of this podcast is always to try to add value wherever I can. And the purpose specifically of the summer series episodes of the podcast are adding value to specific questions that everyday VOpreneurs are asking. So I'm inviting you onto the show to ask your question and get your answer. Welcome to the show today, GM Hakeem. What question can I answer for you?
Hey, Mark. So you've been really helpful with learning how to manage a CRM and your contacts and all that. So my question is basically, let's say you reach out to someone cold, and it
Okay.
could be either on the initial outreach or a secondary, tertiary follow up, whatever. Eventually, they get back to you and they say, "Hey, I liked your stuff.
Okay.
I'd be interested. I'll add you to the roster. Whatever. We'd be
Yep.
happy to work with you someday. Nothing right now."
Okay.
So then at that point, you put them on like a prospect follow-up cycle, let's
Sure.
say. Maybe you
Yes.
touch cycle every month, every quarter, whatever it is that you do. And a couple of touches in, you get a notification that they've unsubscribed, that they've basically said, take me off your mailing list.
Mhm.
And maybe this happens without them personally communicating to you. Maybe it's just a click and unsubscribe button. So it's not like thanks so much. We do like you, but I prefer to unsubscribe. It's just like a boop, unsubscribe. And now you're like, oh no, I've annoyed this person who is really interested in me. And now I have done something to offend them. What do you do? What do you do from there? Obviously I don't want to reach out and be like, sorry, because that's another thing they probably don't want to hear, but you still want to nurture this contact. How would you approach something like that?
This is a really good question. And the reason why, one reason in particular why I like this question is because instinctively we are going to the doomsday scenario.
Yep.
You said it. Oh no, I've annoyed this person.
Yep.
Now what have I done? So I want to share a story
Yeah.
before we start. Earlier this week, at the time that we are recording this interview, earlier this week, I had a client reach out and book me for a job. A client who about 3 years ago unsubscribed from all of my emails, but a client who continues to hire me every year, almost like clockwork, for a particular project that we work on together. So at the time that they initially unsubscribed, my instinct was, oh crap, oh well, there goes another one, right?
Yep. Yep.
But then when they ended up hiring me, I was like, okay, so what if they just don't need to hear from me? What if they've already got me in the books? They already know who I am. They already know that I'm there. They already hire me for this specific project. And so they just don't need those reminders every once in a while. And so it helped me to reframe my perspective on what I was thinking, which was like any other voice actor, we instinctively start to assume the worst. And so this is a client who, despite unsubscribing from all email communication several years ago, continues to hire me every single year. So take that,
Yep. That's
stick
good to
that in your
know.
pocket,
Yeah.
because that is a possibility. So to come back to your original question, let's start by, first of all, for anybody who's listening who's not sure, I have 3 different classifications in my database, 3 primary classifications. A lead is someone who I either haven't reached out to yet or who I have reached out to, haven't had any communication with. A prospect is someone who I have reached out to, who has responded to me in a positive way. So they've expressed an interest, like you said, add you to the roster, loved your stuff, whatever. I classify them as a prospect. Client, obviously that speaks for itself. And I do have different communication styles for a lead versus a prospect versus a client. And I do use sequencing in Nimble for regular ongoing communication with my prospects. If somebody unsubscribes, generally that's the end of the communication for me at that point. And all I can hope for is that they'll keep me in mind when they need me. You know how sometimes you get those positive responses from people and they just say, like, we'll reach out if we need anything, or we'll be in touch if anything comes up or whatever, right?
Yeah. Really generic. You're like, I'm kind of happy, but
We tend to instinctively think that we're getting blown off, right?
yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
just giving us the polite blow off, which why would they do that? But at the same time, what if they're just telling it like it is?
Mhm.
What if, and I know that we never think this way ever, None of us. And I say this from coaching thousands of voice actors.
Yeah.
What if I'll reach out when I need you really means I'll reach out when I need you?
It might. And that requires us to get over our own, inner demons and whatnot. And but
Exactly.
we've got to remind them every quarter. I've got to remind them that I exist because maybe they said that to someone else.
And some of them you absolutely do need to remind every quarter. Some of them will say, I'll keep you in mind, and they need you to help keep them reminded.
Yep.
But some of them are actually saying, when they say, we'll be in touch if we need you, they are actually saying, we'll be in touch if we need you. Now, I have no way of knowing which one's which, just to be clear.
And so, of course, these people, let's say you're going to let this person lie, right? This person says, we'll reach out when you need you. You think, okay, let me just take them at their word. You're still sending them a holiday email. You're still sending them an update if you got new equipment or something once or twice a year, right? I mean, you can't disappear entirely, I would
So
think.
when I get that initial, we'll keep you in mind, and I convert them to a prospect, at that point, they go into a sequence for ongoing communication.
Sure.
If we get to a point where they have unsubscribed, I have to assume, so that I don't go mental, I have to assume that if they had previously said, we'll keep you in mind, or we'll be in touch when we need you, or whatever, that they'll keep me in mind, they'll be in touch, whatever. I don't want to continue to email them at that point because I do think that that's when you cross the line. When you've requested, when an unsubscribe has been requested, I mean, think about yourself. If you unsubscribe from somebody's email list and then they continue to send you emails once a quarter, and you're like, no, seriously, I unsubscribed. What are you doing? Right?
Right. Of course.
So I am going to honor those unsubscription requests always. I never take those people out of my database. I do not take them out of my CRM. I mark them as unsubscribed, or I mark them as dead in my database, because something that I don't want to do is inadvertently add them back into communication 6 months down the road, because I can't remember everybody who has unsubscribed, not unsubscribed, whatever. That's why I have my CRM. So I do not take them out of the database. I just leave them in there as a dead lead. And then all I can do at that point is hope for the best. Or is it? Or is it?
Okay.
But wait, there's more. What I will do, if I have had a really positive interaction with a prospect and they have requested to unsubscribe, I will assume that they just don't want the emails, which is fine. But if I am connected with them on social media, for example, if I'm connected with them on LinkedIn, I will still periodically pop in, and I can use my CRM to give me that reminder. So I will still periodically pop into their LinkedIn profile and see if there's something that I can drop a comment on or whatever. So I'm still popping up. My name is still in front of them. I'm honoring the request to unsubscribe at that point, but I don't think I'm being pushy. And it's not like I'm going to do it every day or, check out their profile incessantly. We're not going cyberstalker here. We're just periodically engaging with our network, which is, if we're not going to engage with people in social media, what the heck is the point of social media at that point?
That's true. Well, that's also that's also a good reminder to maybe engage with them in social media shortly thereafter, within a month or so of them saying, yeah, we loved your stuff, because after they unsubscribe is not the time when you want to be like, LinkedIn connection request.
Oh, by the way, let me send you a connection request.
No, thanks.
And actually, you bring up a really valid point, and this is something that I do teach with some of my marketing courses, is I use the LinkedIn connection as part of my follow-up strategy initially. So what I don't want to do is send out a marketing email, have somebody say, Mark, great demos. We love your stuff. We'll keep you in mind. And then 12 minutes later, I've sent them a connection request on LinkedIn. I've followed them on Instagram. I'm now watching them on YouTube. I've subscribed to them on TikTok, and it all hits all at once, right?
No.
I don't want to do that.
No.
No matter how excited you are about the lead, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be that guy.
You're not like in high school anymore. You got to tone it down.
However, when I do get that positive response, I will set a reminder for myself. And in a couple of weeks, I will send them a LinkedIn connection request, and I will say, hey, it was so great to to connect with you, via email. I'm really looking forward to our first opportunity together. Just thought it would be nice to include you in my network here, whatever, right? And then if they accept, now you do have another form of communication. So I think it's one of those areas, to come back to your specific question, which was I've had a positive interaction. I sent them a few follow-up emails. They've unsubscribed. What do I do now? I think you honor the unsubscribe. And every once in a while, maybe just periodically engage with them on LinkedIn. Don't sell them anything. Don't slip into their DMs or whatever.
Right.
Just leave a comment or something so that your name pops up. And then all you can do at that point so that you don't go mental is trust that if they need you, they will reach out just like they said they would, and recognize that there are plenty of other leads that are out there to be connected with and plenty of other prospects in your database who need the communication. And so you can devote your time and your effort and your attention to those things.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. The magic of social media.
We have like our superpower as voice actors is to overthink all of this stuff and somehow manage to assume the worst of every situation. We
Yeah.
go to the default. I've upset them. I've annoyed them. I've blown my chance. They're never going to work with me. They're probably going to tell all of their friends. They're probably going to blacklist me on I don't know how we go there,
Just
but we go there.
Spiraling anxiety.
Yeah, spiraling anxiety, which you would think for people who live in an industry of rejection, you'd think we would get to a point where it would just become a lot easier to handle. We would just be so much more equipped to deal with it, but it doesn't always seem that way. But
but this is like this is like I like you, but now I unsubscribed. It's like you're sending me mixed messages. Now I don't know, anyway.
And they might be. Right. They might be. I would say so here's another piece of advice that I would add to that. Looking at your sequence on the whole and looking at the number of prospects that are in your sequence on the whole. One unsubscribe out of a whole list of prospects is nothing to stress about.
Totally.
Now, if 20% of the people that you put into that sequence are unsubscribing, that is something. That's a signal that I'm now paying attention to. So the one who unsubscribes, I'm not sweating. I'm going to assume they just aren't actually interested, or they will genuinely keep me in mind when they need me. But if a large number of people are unsubscribing, then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really evaluate, what am I saying in my sequence? Do these emails need to be written? Can I add value in some other way because my emails aren't great? Right. Am I sending too frequently? Like things like that are questions that I would be asking. And so I do think that part of that assessment comes from what are the overall results that we're seeing. It's the same idea behind when you're sending marketing emails. You can send 100 marketing emails and you can get 15 people who respond and say, GM, you are amazing and we're excited to have the opportunity to work with you. And you can have one person who sends an email that says, GM, why don't you go jump off a cliff? I am so sick and tired of being marketed to by voice actors. Mm-hmm. Now we sent 100 messages and we got 15 people who want to work with us. Which message are we paying the most attention to?
Oh, yeah. Well, we all know it's the one that's going to drive us to sleeplessness.
And it's the one that is going to make us want to stop email marketing. It's the one that makes us think, I'm doing this all wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. My strategy sucks. I suck. I've upset. And we forget about the fact that there are 15 people who want to work with us.
Yep.
To the one person who was apparently having a bad day and just happened to take it out on you. And it's the same thing I would say that the same thing happens with our prospect sequences. Yeah. We're missing the fact, or we run the risk that we miss the fact that all of those other people are still subscribed, right, still getting emails, still obviously interested. And we get too hung up on that one person who said no.
To sort of put an analog out there, someone yells at you while you're driving, you don't stop driving. And they're like, oh gosh, I guess I'm a terrible driver. I better just bike everywhere from now on. I mean, I do bike a lot, but it's beside the point. But at the same time, just like you said, there are companies, newsletters, whoever I've unsubscribed from I still have a high opinion of some of them. I still will patronize them. I still like them, but I don't want the email. So that
Exactly.
makes sense.
I'm the same way. There are so many things that I have unsubscribed from because I just don't need those emails, but I still do business with them. It didn't change the way I felt about them. I
Right.
get a zillion emails,
Yeah.
and I genuinely will remember them when I need them. And
Right.
so I think that's the focus that we have to take. So honor the unsubscribe. Don't send them any more messages at that point. Mark them as a dead lead in your CRM just so that you don't inadvertently email them down the road, but maybe set a quarterly reminder or something just to pop onto their LinkedIn, see if they've got something you can drop a comment on and see what happens down the road.
Fantastic. Wise words. And thank you.
All right, man. It's so good to have you on the show. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for bringing me on, Mark.